welcome to the 330 Sports Show. My name is Justin Coffin. We hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving break and holiday with their families. Hopefully no more than 10 people were there. But it is Tuesday, December 1st, 2020, which is the start of the meteorological winter.
That's a tough one.
I think I kind of butchered that a little bit, but if you look outside, it is taking note. We in Youngstown didn't get hit too bad, but I think a little bit north of us got a lot of snow today. But yeah, it is definitely winter, and we are here in downtown Youngstown, Ohio. We're obviously produced by Joe Danier and his Youngstown Studio Network. We'd love to hear from you. A lot going on in the sports world this past weekend. If you would like to call in, our live lines are open, 330-595-1600. Again, if you want to call in live, 330-595-1600. If you would like to... Are we doing the text line? Or?
Sure.
Yeah. All right. We'll open up the text line too if you're interested. 330-333-5265. That's again, the text line is 330-333-5265. And that line, you can text in pretty much 24/7 and we can, if we don't get to it today, we can get to it next show. So on today's show, huge recap of basically what was, pretty much from last Thursday in the sports world, even going back to last Wednesday. But, we had Mike Tyson and Roy Jones back in the ring, a couple legends. We had obviously a really, really busy weekend of NFL football. We'll talk about that. We'll talk obviously about our Browns getting to 8-3. We'll talk about the Steelers and Ravens, which keeps getting postponed. Ridiculous. So I think they're on cancellation or postponement number 4 now. So as of now, they're slated to play tomorrow afternoon, Wednesday at 3:40. Unfortunately for the Buckeyes, their game was canceled late Friday night before Saturday's game. We'll talk about that a little bit. It was a cool weekend for women in the sports world. Vanderbilt's kicker came down with COVID, and so they didn't have a scholarship kicker on board. So Vanderbilt, who does not have a men's soccer team, went to their women's soccer team, and a goalie from that team, her name is Sarah Fuller, ended up kicking in that game. Vanderbilt stinks, so she was only able to actually only kick off one time. She didn't get any field goal chances. So, but that was still cool for her to see the field. And the Browns have a coach on staff. She's like the sort of like the liaison for the other coaches, but with the tight end coach, his wife had a baby this past weekend, so she stepped in and played the role of tight ends coach for the Browns this weekend. So pretty cool moment in sports for women. And her name was Callie Brownson. So a little play on words there too with the Browns in her name. So that was pretty neat. We have a little bit of good news for our Mahoning Valley Scrappers that came down this weekend. We'll talk about that towards the end of the show. And last Wednesday, college basketball, even though there was hundreds or dozens at least of postponements, they did tip off last weekend. So let's start here with the weekend that was in the NFL. So I'm going to have Mario put up the graphic of the scores, and we'll talk a little bit about these games. On this graphic, you're not going to see the Thanksgiving games, but in those games, Houston took care of Detroit. They really just pounded Detroit. Deshaun Watson and Will Fuller had huge games in that. Detroit then subsequently the next day fired their coach, Matt Patricia, fired their general manager, and Will Fuller, who I mentioned in that game also, was then suspended the rest of the season for performance enhancing drugs. So, and he's
the trifecta.
So, I mean, rough for Will Fuller, especially if you got him on like a fantasy team, but otherwise, great game for Houston, taking care. If you watched any of the Washington and Dallas game, Washington and Dallas it was a really, really close game into the fourth quarter. I think there was about 12 minutes left. and I believe the score was something like 20-16. And Dallas was down to Washington. Dallas then fakes a punt, which, if I have to say, was probably a top 5 worst play, worst decision in all NFL history. It was awful. I don't have the video for you, but if you get a chance, Google fake punt Dallas Cowboys Thanksgiving, you'll get a laugh out of it. It's pretty bad. And then the Thursday night game was supposed to be Pittsburgh and Baltimore. So that game was postponed from Thursday night Thanksgiving to then Sunday. And then from Sunday, it was then postponed to today, and then from today it was postponed till tomorrow at 3:40.
Such BS.
It's and I have different reasons for it. You know, we're going to talk about one other NFL game here in a little bit, that the NFL did not cut the Denver Broncos any slack, but I feel like they're cutting the Ravens a little bit of slack,
weird,
or possibly even the Steelers too, because the Steelers, a lot of Steelers fans, if you know, you were on social media, were complaining this past weekend. But you know, they have 3-4 important guys on that COVID list too. And you know, it's just going to be the way, you know, and even the Browns, do we want to play without Myles Garrett? No. Hell no. He's the best defensive player. Exactly. So, you know, like I don't necessarily think the NFL has like one reason why one is better than the other.
Well, what's their official reason? Like, why?
That's a good. You know what? And I didn't hear why. You know, I don't know if they're going to say it was a competitive disadvantage. Well, yeah, if you're not playing without Lamar Jackson, it's going to be a competitive disadvantage if you're not playing without your running backs. But Denver, again, we'll get to that game in a minute. They had their hands tied literally behind their back, and were not given any shot in that game. But that game now, Baltimore-Pittsburgh, is supposed to be kicked off tomorrow at 3:40, which a Wednesday afternoon game at 3:40 in Pittsburgh. I believe that's got to be a first in NFL history. But the reason they're doing that is NBC, who's broadcasting the game, has their Christmas tree lighting from New York City. I think it's at 8 o'clock. So you got to get that in, you know. Sponsors probably want that money. As you can see.
And Wednesday, ping pong was canceled, so they slid it in there.
Yeah, whatever it takes. You got to get those games in. But you got to get the tree lighting in. Most important. As you can see from the score sheet, Tennessee jumped back and took advantage in the AFC South, avenging its loss to the Colts a few weeks ago. We'll talk about playoff standings here in a little bit. The head-scratching performance for me this weekend was the Las Vegas Raiders. You know, the Vegas Raiders came into Cleveland a couple weeks ago, really dominated in the run game. Obviously, there was some bad weather, but they went into a dome in Atlanta, and Atlanta obviously has had their struggles this year. They got pounded by the Falcons. They dropped that game 43-6. And that drops Vegas. Vegas was sitting at 6-3, tied with the Browns. They're now 6-5. So they're going to have a big uphill climb to get into the playoffs if they want to do that. All right, now let's talk about, this is the 2020 game of the week. The Broncos. Okay. If you can see on the score, 31-3, the Saints took care of the Broncos, but the Broncos had zero quarterbacks available for this game. They were all placed on the COVID list, or close contacts, or contact tracing, whatever, you want to say it was, but they were given no leeway. So the Broncos, all 3 of their rostered quarterbacks on the COVID list. So what they had to do, they brought up a wide receiver, undrafted wide receiver from their practice squad named Kendall Hinton. And good for this guy, because I mean, this guy got 0 snaps in practice the week. I think maybe the day before he might have got a snap, or a couple rounds of snaps in practice. But he was this guy named Kendall Hinton, wide receiver again on their practice squad, was basically called up and said, "Hey, you're playing quarterback for us. This guy, he's not unfamiliar to the quarterback position. He played a little bit at Wake Forest in college, where he had 8 touchdowns and 7 interceptions and 1,500 yards as a quarterback there. And he also rushed for 1,000 yards and 12 touchdowns at Wake Forest. Now, college and the pro game, a little bit different, you know.
That's your first game for you, buddy. All you got to do is get in there and win the game.
All you got to do is go against possibly the best team in the NFC and the Saints and their defense. Now, this guy also was a high school state championship winning quarterback. Again, high school and college, much different beast than the pros. So next time says, oh, I could do that. Next time somebody says that, like, oh, I could go, you know, play one game at quarterback or one game at wide receiver or something in the NFL. Bullshit. I mean, this guy is a state championship winning high school quarterback, a Division I wide receiver, but also could play quarterback at a fairly decent level in college. And he is thrown into this position, and he was something like 1 of 9 with, I don't know how many yards, but he threw 2 interceptions. But, you know, I give this guy a lot of credit because, you know, he was thrown into a very, very rough situation.
Well, I'll tell you, if I were him, every play would be a run play.
Exactly.
Every single one.
and in the NFL, if you're a one-trick pony, like you had said last week, you're going to get shut down. And I don't care how good or how bad the defense is. Teams are going to be able to figure you out. Now, an interesting side note from this game, they have a quality control coach on offense, and his name is Rob Calabrese. And I just read this story yesterday, and this was unbelievable to me. So the Denver Broncos asked the NFL for permission for this guy to be the quarterback, a quality control coach. No playing experience or anything, because they figured he could run the offense. He knows the ins and outs of it. But, you know, and I'm sure he had some, I'm sure he's an athlete, you know, being in the pro game. But, you know, the NFL denied the request because they don't want teams using coaches, like storing them on their coaching staff. So let's say, you know, the NFL, you're allowed to dress 53 guys, but they don't want to say like, well, let's bring in Tim Tebow as a quality control coach, and then if we really need him, we'll throw him in, you know, something like that. So I thought that was really, really interesting. Just something cool. So just for fun, when I heard about this story, I threw it out on Facebook and I said, if you were hypothetically, if you needed a quarterback that was in a movie or a TV show, give me who you would start. You get one pick. So do you have any quarterbacks from a TV or movie that I have a great list here if you don't. So
what's that one movie where the team was made up of convicts?
Oh, yeah. The Longest Yard.
That's it.
Okay, so Paul Crewe, who is on this list, I got him. So we'll get to that one in a minute. So people wrote in and said Chris Evans, who is now, I think, Captain America, but it's an incredibly dumb but hilarious movie called Not Another Teen Movie. They're like, I want that guy as my quarterback. Uncle Rico from Napoleon Dynamite.
Yes.
And I wrote back to the person that wrote that. And I said, you know what? That's actually perfect because he's got a great line in that movie. And he says, I used to be able to throw a football over those mountains. And I'm like, well, they're playing in Denver. Why not? Why not?
And he practiced all the time. I mean,
exactly. Yeah. Throwing that quesadilla or meat or whatever at Napoleon. This one was good. Shane Falco from The Replacements, who's played by Keanu Reeves. He also had another character in a movie called Point Break, and he was a college quarterback in that. And I don't know if Keanu Reeves has some sort of ties to Ohio State because in the movie The Replacements, they said he was a college quarterback at Ohio State. And in Point Break, I believe, they said his background, he played quarterback or was some sort of player at Ohio State. So that was an interesting one. Willie Beeman, who was played by Jamie Foxx in Any Given Sunday. That'd be a good choice. Stan Gable. This one threw me. I had to Google this one, but somebody said Stan Gable. And I said, who the hell is Stan Gable? Like, really? But if you ever saw the TV show Married with Children, He played a character called Jefferson on that show, but Stan Gable was the name of the quarterback in Revenge of the Nerds, so he played that character. Gotcha. Paul Crewe, right, who is played by Adam Sandler in The Longest Yard, and I think even going way back is played by Burt Reynolds in the original movie. Johnny Moxon, Varsity Blues, great quarterback name. Joe Kane from the movie The Program, that's another great one. A couple other viewers said Jerry Harris or Ronnie Bass, and they were the quarterbacks in Remember the Titans. One of them was Sunshine, and the other one was the kid who came in and replaced him. This one was funny. G Granule, who was the quarterback of the SC LSU Mud Dogs in The Waterboy. I
was going to say the MS Mud Dogs.
And there's a great line where Adam Sandler's character gets really pissed off at him because the quarterback from the other team changes into his face and he's like, needle dick. And he's like, water sucks, and all that stuff. So, and then the final one I got, which was great, a high school quarterback, AC Slater from Saved by the Bell. So that was just for fun, but I was like, you know what, that's a nice show segment. We're going to throw that in there. Staying with the NFL, but switching to another interesting segment, bad beats of the weekend. So there were two really bad beats from this weekend. One happened Sunday, one happened last night in the Monday night game. So first bad beat, and this was my lock of the week, and I posted this Sunday morning on our 330 sports show page, but I had Buffalo Bills lock of the week. I don't know why. I just felt it, like a West Coast team coming to the East Coast. The Chargers are kind of a little bit down this year. Buffalo's having a pretty nice year, but this was a bad beat for the bettors if you took the LA Chargers. Here's why. They had, I believe, 3 cracks at the end zone, down 27-17 at the 1 yard line with 15 seconds or so left. So Buffalo ended up covering, but the Chargers, who are struggling late in games this year, they didn't have a chance to win, but they had a chance to cover. So bettors probably thought that was an easy win right there, being at the 1 yard line, first and goal, and they ended up not getting in. So if you bet the Buffalo Bills, you were extremely happy. Listen to this bad beat though. Here's the bad beat, maybe that might want to give you might want to give up betting if you bet the Seattle Seahawks last night. So last night, Monday night, Seattle at Philadelphia, the Eagles were underdogs. Okay. So Eagles, were getting 6.5 points. So they were trailing by 14 points with 15 seconds left to go in the game. Carson Wentz, Eagles quarterback, throws up a Hail Mary. It's tipped up, ball deflected, and finally was caught one-handed by the Eagles tight end Richard Rodgers. That made it an 8-point game. Most teams probably just kick the extra point. For some reason, though, the Eagles go for 2. They get it. And that led to a 6-point loss for the Eagles and a really, really bad night if you bet the Seahawks to cover the spread, because then that made it a 6-point game. Eagles covered. So really, really rough beats if you are a bettor this weekend. Again, I think that might make you want to give up gambling going forward, or put you in Gamblers Anonymous or something like that. Scheduling. Here's an interesting thing for scheduling. Most of this, actually all of this, is due to COVID-19, which if I see the numbers in Ohio and they're still up above, I believe, 8,000 a day. It's insane. And what's getting a little bit scary is the hospitalizations, and we're not going to get into that. That's another topic for another show. But the NFL is going to have a hard time finishing this season, I think, or they might have to look into a possible bubble or something. But here's some scheduling notes. We talked about the Ravens and Steelers now playing tomorrow, which is Wednesday, December 2nd at 3:40. So that game's taken care of. Tomorrow, hopefully, it doesn't get postponed again, which then changes the Steelers' next game in Washington. They were supposed to play on Sunday. They're going to now play out Monday at 5:00. And then that changes also the Ravens and Cowboys. They're going to now play next Tuesday, December 8th at 8:00. So
you're the one that said football every day of the week was awesome. You caused this.
You know what? I'm just saying, I'm just making a note that scheduling for the NFL has to suck. But as a viewer, as a watcher of football, it's pretty cool. And we'll see what kind of work production is done. And, that game's not just important for the Ravens and the Steelers. It's important for the Browns too. Right. So I think there might be some lost productivity at work tomorrow if people are streaming that game, if they get off at like 5:00 or something like that. So we'll see how that goes. And one other major scheduling note, this doesn't necessarily affect game times, but the 49ers, the San Francisco 49ers are not allowed to play in their home stadium right now. They are banned from playing in their county, which I think is Santa Clara County in California, because there's an ordinance for no contact sports in that county. So obviously that shuts down high school sports, but in most counties, you don't have a professional team. In that county, they have, I believe it's the San Jose Sharks and obviously the San Francisco 49ers. So the 49ers are going to then now move their game from San Francisco and they're going to play in Arizona. So just some craziness around the NFL and what is in what is 2020. So let's go ahead and shift a little bit here. Towards let's talk about the Browns. And the first thing I want to put up on this list is you're going to see the NFL rushing leaders. So Derrick Henry, who's obviously been just pounding the rock this year for the Titans, is head and shoulders above everyone else right now. Dalvin Cook's up there, but those two are really having great years. But if you look down the list just a little bit, tied for 6th is Nick Chubb. Oh, yeah. Nick Chubb has missed 5 games this season. So just imagine what his numbers would be if he had played in all of those games. But Nick Chubb, obviously averaging roughly looks like about 6 yards a carry, and he leads the NFL in most 20 plus yards rushing. Most 20-yard or more rushing attempts this season with 10. So just very, very impressive numbers. But the awesome thing with the Browns this year, and we're going to get into a little bit of a breakdown here, they are finding ways to win games, or maybe a better way of saying it is they're finding ways of not losing games. Yes. Browns teams in the past, there was always a different way that they lost, or a different way they ripped out your heart, or just, there was always very painful endings with the Browns. And, I can think of so many. I can think of like the Bottlegate one with the Jaguars way back when. There was a game with Baltimore that just was crazy. There's been so many games. They've lost on Hail Marys, they've lost on bad calls, this and that. But for whatever reason, this year they are finding ways to not lose those games and to finish them out. So that marks, whether you think a 27-25 win against the Jaguars is impressive or not, to me, a win is a win. And Kevin Stefanski, this was a great quote from last week's game. He said, there are no ugly wins. A win, that win out there was beautiful. I don't care if you win sloppy, you blow a team out, a win is a win in the NFL, because on any given Sunday, any team can beat you. Yeah. So what's your thoughts on what you saw?
And I, you and I have been following the Browns long enough that there were so many times where it was come from behind and you're down 2 scores and always came down to the last 2 minutes. That's where your injuries happen. Like when you're trying to do more than, what the math says is possible, is when all that kind of stuff happens. Yeah. Here, they're grinding it out and winning games the way that all the other teams, used to win games. You know what I mean? So I'm with you that I think that the tide has changed for them finally.
For sure. And so we mentioned it earlier. Myles Garrett did not play in this game. He has now since been removed from the COVID list, which is awesome. So he will be playing this weekend, and we need him. We'll talk about the Tennessee game more on Thursday, but we need him to play against a,
so now, if you're a coach and you got a lot of your guys now on the comeback, and you want to preserve it and not let anybody else go on it because you knew what the disadvantage was.
Right.
As a coach, how much do you control your players?
Are you talking about being on the COVID stuff?
Yes.
From what I can just go off of what Kevin Stefanski said, because being a coach this year, especially a professional coach, has to be so different than in the past because, they train these guys, they talk to them, but, these are people just like you and me, professional athletes. Yes. But, they have families, they have kids that go to school and come home. And so I would just say you err on the side of caution. But I don't think you can prevent people from living their lives. You might say, hey, instead of going to a restaurant, get takeout or, whatever it might be.
Remember, like 2 years ago, you had players that were doing over 100 miles an hour on the freeway in their Lamborghini and smoking weed and getting in bar fights. Right. Now it's a totally different thing.
It's a different animal to deal with. Yeah. And that's a great question because I just think, I think you what you do, and I think any good coach will tell you this, is they will say, you prepare your people the best you can, and you almost have to trust them. And the ones that either ruin it or put the team in a bad situation, you might have to cut them loose. And hopefully it seems like most people are making the right decisions and doing the good things. So, however, Myles Garrett or Andy Janovich, who is the fullback, or whoever it might be, this is a pandemic. It's not just NFL. The NFL is the small picture, sports world in general is the small picture when, some of these people, they might have family members that are directly involved with dealing with the public. And what do you do in that situation? It's like,
the whole team,
let's just say, and I don't know, let's just say hypothetically a player's wife might work in the news industry and have to go out and interview people, or they might maybe work in a hospital and they're dealing with sick patients. And, it's just one of those things that you almost have to keep your fingers crossed. You wear your mask, you do what you're being told to do, but at the end of the day, that's all you can do and hope. So,
I got another coaching question for you since we're talking about the Browns.
Yeah.
So you got Baker that has these, super accurate tight window throws to can't put it and finesse it into any window because he can't settle himself down.
Well, and I'm glad you said that. I'm going to actually have you throw up the stat here. And I'm going to just talk over this stat. And then I'll talk about the stat in a minute. But the Baker Mayfield, I think what everyone's going to take away from that game is the throw he missed to, I think it was Rashard Higgins, who was absolutely, you or I could have made that throw if, and actually I think Kareem Hunt was wide open going the opposite way. But, I think what people see is that missed throw. And then I think on the next down might have missed a little bit high to Jarvis Landry too. So the Browns ended up settling for 3 in that situation. But, overall, I thought Baker played a pretty good game, but to answer that question, being in a quarterback's brain, quarterbacks have to think next level. You know what I'm saying? They have to think, and he's probably not looking, right there. He might be going through his progressions, and he might be looking at, his ex receiver way out far wide, and then he might be looking at what the defense is doing. Where if he's scanning, maybe. We have the benefit of seeing the entire field from the camera angle
without guys coming at you.
Without also huge 6'4", 300-pound guys rushing you. So Now, with that said, that's a bad throw. And he if you're a first round draft pick and a franchise quarterback, you have to make that throw. And hopefully what Baker said was he will learn from that and get better. And, I'm sure watching it on tape, and I'm sure right as soon as that play was over, he knew he missed that throw. And has he missed a couple throws the past couple of weeks? Yes. But one thing he hasn't done, knock on wood, he has not thrown an interception in the past 4 games. So he is improving. He is also, I think, being a Browns fan if you've been a Browns fan for, let's say, the last even 10 years, you and I have been Browns fans for 30 years. Yep. But we haven't had a good quarterback since Bernie Kosar. And, so you're going back 30 years for a good quarterback. Now, is Baker Mayfield Tom Brady? Is he Pat Mahomes? No, but is he a quarterback on an 8-3 football team? Yes. So I think he's doing what he needs to do. And keep in mind, he's missing Odell Beckham Jr. He also did not have an off season to work with a lot of these guys, putting in a whole new offense. I think he's on his 4th head coach in 3 years. So I don't want to make excuses for him, but I think Baker Mayfield is doing exactly what the Browns need him to do right now. He's great at rolling out and getting those play action passes.
So do you think his consistency will come in a little bit?
I think he will get better the more he's in this offense, the more confidence he builds. Now, I think this weekend he's got another good opportunity. I think the Browns are going to be in a shootout a little bit this weekend because Tennessee's got a really good offense. Their defense is a little suspect. So we'll see. But yeah, for him to, just taking steps, and you and I have talked about it from the get-go. I feel like every week we said, if you would have told me the Browns were 5-3, if you would have told me the Browns were 6-3, 7-3, now they're 8-3.
Not even believable anymore. This isn't even the Browns.
No. And the Browns aren't going to win their division. The Steelers are going to win the division, but the Browns, if they can hold, and we'll show the playoff picture in a minute here, but if the Browns can hold where they're at, they're going to be in a 4-5 matchup, which is probably going to be against either Tennessee or Buffalo. And I like our chances in that. You avoid the Steelers, you avoid the Chiefs, and but again, right now for me, it's one game at a time. One game at a time. I really think the Browns are becoming a nicely gelled team. And, we've been without some of our best players this year. We've been without Myles Garrett 2 games. We're without our best corner, Denzel Ward this past weekend. Nick Chubb, our best player, arguably our best player too, missed 5 games. Wyatt Teller, the best offensive lineman or guard right now in the NFL, missed another 3 or 4 games. Ronnie Harrison, unfortunately, I don't know his status, but
he went on his shoulder, right?
Yeah, and I think it was the first play of the game against his former team. So give the Browns credit because they are stepping up when they need to, and they're doing sometimes just enough to win the game. But you know what? Just enough is better than not enough. So that's kind of where
Jacksonville concerned me. That the closeness of that game really did concern me, and there's probably another 14 points that should have been on that board anyhow. So
Agreed.
I'm considering that.
I agree. And Harrison Bryant, the rookie, one of the first plays of the second half, fumbled the ball, which Jacksonville then went right down and scored a touchdown. One thing I want to say that was Cleveland Browns-ish that the Jaguars did was, so after they score that touchdown, they go up 19-7 or 19-17. They could have kicked, or they actually did kick the extra point and went up 20-17, but the Browns were offsides. They took the point off the board and then went for 2. They didn't get it. So they were chasing that point the rest of the game. Yeah. So they were chasing those points the rest of the game, and that ended up being the difference in the game. So pretty awesome.
Trying to get cute.
Exactly. But let's throw up that Baker Mayfield stat one more time. And if you look at these numbers, Baker Mayfield little less than 10,000 yards through his first 40 starts in the NFL, 66 touchdowns, 42 picks, 62% completion percentage. I threw up 3 other big names: Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers. His numbers are very comparable to all 3 of those guys. Now, better stats pretty much overall than Tom Brady at this point. A few more picks, but not quite the touchdowns or yards that Manning had, but a higher percentage and way less interceptions. So, these are 3 greats, all-time greats, not just recent greats. So these are 3-time all-time greats of the game that through their first 40 starts, Baker Mayfield is right in line with. And again, 4 coaches, 3 years, 3 offensive systems. He's learning. He hasn't necessarily had the best talent in the league around him. He's got really good talent now, but like you said, Joe, I think he's showing that progress that we want to see. Now, is he a top 10 quarterback in the league right now? Probably not. And there's going to be those debates of, do you extend him? Do you not? Well, right now he's doing what the Browns need him to do. Like we had talked about, he's winning games, and he's not costing you games. And I think for the Browns right now, that's what they need to do. And hopefully, like we said, he can keep his confidence getting better and better. But I'm happy where we're at.
Yeah. Even if you said, oh, he's not the guy,
right,
and you wouldn't drafted like the Clemson guy or something coming out, I don't think that's the answer. I think you go step backwards.
Right. Exactly. And with the Browns record, we're going to be picking in the 20s. So I don't think a quarterback is our biggest need. I think we're using those picks on defense next year.
Yes. How'd they do, by the way? I didn't get to see our backs here. How'd they do against Jacksonville?
The defensive guys, yep. Overall pretty well. I thought Sendejo didn't hurt us. Let's just say that. But overall, not bad. Now, Jacksonville's not the greatest team in the world. They're obviously 1-9 for a reason. But Glennon, their quarterback, who was a former starter in the NFL, but making his first start of the year, had a few nice throws, but without Garrett and without Denzel Ward and pretty much without Ronnie Harrison the whole game, overall, I thought the guys that we had in there stepped up and
put some pressure,
did a decent enough job. I don't think we got the pressure that we did last week. Like Olivier Vernon was huge for us last week. He did not necessarily bring that to the table this week, but they did just enough again to make a couple big plays, to whether it was to get the defense off the field or whatever it might be. But they did just enough so that the Browns offense could do their thing. But again, the game probably should have been at least a 10-point win, but a win is a win right now, and we will take it. And sometimes there's trap games in the NFL too. That this game was screaming trap game to me. But it was nice to see the sunshine on the field and all that. So I'll tell you what. Let's throw up this next graphic, which is the AFC playoff picture. A little bit better.
There you go.
There we go.
Look at you.
Oh, I'm learning this tech side of stuff. It's all. Let me make it a little bit bigger there. All right. So as we can look at the playoff picture, you can see the division leaders. Steelers sitting at Steelers sitting at 10-0. Chiefs are right on their heels though, and the Chiefs are playing unbelievable football. The Chiefs in the first quarter against Tampa just lit them up. It ended up being a close game, but Kansas City just dominated that game. Tennessee, who the Browns play this week, sitting at 8-3, leaders of the South. Buffalo also 8-3, and the Browns, you can see as right now they'd be the 5th seed in the wild card. So they're the top wild card. Miami sitting at 7-4. Indianapolis at 7-4, and then like I said, the Raiders. That is not actually correct. The Raiders should be 6-5 on that graphic now. So the Raiders are actually 2 full games back of the Browns. Baltimore still 6-4. We'll see what they do. Unfortunately, we're probably going to be rooting for the Steelers tomorrow because we need another game on the Ravens is huge. And the Browns play the Ravens coming up on a Monday night here in the next couple weeks. New England still sitting there. They just never go away fully, but New England is sitting there. But obviously the Browns, kind of the teams you need to worry about are Miami, the Colts, and the Raiders. And Baltimore. So really 4 teams for 2 spots, that's 5 teams for 3 spots. So we'll see how that all plays out. But if you're a Browns fan, you got to really like where they're at. Just kind of peeking ahead at the schedule. They play 3 good teams and they play 2 lousy teams. So if the Browns let's just say they finish out the season 2-3, you're sitting at 10-6, probably puts you in a good spot for a playoff berth. But, hopefully they can pick up a win versus one of those other 3 teams.
Now, by the time you get to the end of the schedule and you play Pittsburgh again, what do you put your chances at? You think it's a winnable game still?
Well, with Pittsburgh, it's going to be interesting because Pittsburgh's the last game of the season. So if Pittsburgh has not locked up the division, or the number 1 overall seed, which is a big deal this year because there's only 1 bye in the playoffs. I think if they haven't done that, that's going to be a really competitive game.
Us against Rudolph again. I can't wait.
Or it could be, yeah, that's a great point. So, but if the Steelers are 15-0 in that game, could you imagine that? Could you imagine that if the Steelers are 15-0 and the Browns could knock them off? That would to me really as a Browns fan, I would rather lose that game and make the playoffs rather than win that game and, possibly be on the outside looking into the playoffs. But let's just win it and hope for the best but, I like our chances against the Ravens right now more so than the Steelers, just because the Ravens are a little beat up, but, I don't know. It's going to be interesting. To me, the best team on that list is Kansas City by far. For sure. Probably in the NFL. The Steelers, I'd say the best 2 teams in all of the NFL are Kansas City and Pittsburgh. Sitting right now, the AFC is a very loaded conference with good football teams. The NFC has a couple nice teams, New Orleans, Tampa, but
we're stacked.
Yeah, we are. The AFC is very, very loaded. So
well, I think in the NFC, what the best record is like 5 and something, right?
Well, in the NFC East, it is. Yeah, in the NFC East, it is. The Saints are, I think, sitting at 8-2. And there's some other good teams, but no one like the AFC side of things. So let's change gears here. Let's stay with football, but let's switch to college football here. We're going to throw up the NCAA top 25. Hopefully you can see that on your screen, but here's a question I had from a viewer. And they had said, should the Cincinnati Bearcats be ranked ahead of Ohio State? And not necessarily because they're a better football team up and down, but because here's why. They just threw out some stats for me. Cincinnati is 8-0, and their 7 FBS opponents have combined for a 33-27 record, which is a 55% winning percentage. 4 of those teams with winning records: Army, Memphis, SMU, and Central Florida, and 1 500 team, which is Houston. All 7 of the FBS teams have suffered losses, obviously, to Cincinnati. So if we look at those teams, other than their Cincinnati games, they have a 62% winning percentage at 33-20 overall. Ohio State, and everybody knows I'm an Ohio State homer, but I'm gonna say facts, just the way things are. But Ohio State has only beaten 1 team with a winning record this year. Ohio State's opponents are combined 9-14, and if you take out that 1 loss Ohio State gave those teams, their combined winning percentage is 9-10, so sitting at 47.5%. So we have 1 really good win versus Indiana. Is that worth, this is just this viewer's opinion, is that worth more than 4 good wins that Cincinnati has over mid-major teams? I would say it is, because they're still Big Ten teams, but that's a very, very interesting question they posed. Ohio State's also their win against Indiana was only by 7 points, where Cincinnati, those 4 tough opponents they played, they beat them by 21 points on average. So interesting questions from some viewers out there. But
what we said that at the beginning of this is that we're going to have some unfair things that happen because of it. Ohio State didn't opt out of these things because they felt like it. They're forced into it. So then taking what is left on the tree after that's going to be an unfair thing no matter what happens.
Right. Well, and the frustrating thing for me as an Ohio State fan, obviously this weekend stunk with the game being canceled. Ryan Day, their head coach, came down with COVID. And, you know, Ohio State doesn't necessarily release the players who were on that list for, you know, they're still amateurs and all that stuff and all the medical and legal reasons. But, you know, this weekend, they were actually going to fly out Saturday morning ahead of a noon kickoff to play that game just to try to get it in, which was a little dicey on the logistics and things like that. But they ended up canceling it Friday night, which was frustrating. But, you know, that game earlier against Maryland, that was not their fault. That game was canceled. All Ohio State players were healthy. They were ready to go. And Maryland canceled that game, and they had enough scholarship athletes above the Big Ten's like threshold to go ahead and play that game, and they still didn't. Yep. So it's just a frustrating year. And I don't think the playoff committee, who meets, and the new results will be released tonight. They meet every Tuesday, or they meet every weekend, and then the results are released every Tuesday night now going forward. But it's going to be interesting the rest of the season, because right now, Ohio State's still not guaranteed to play this weekend against Michigan State. And if you look at other comparable teams, Maryland and some other ones that canceled a game, they then subsequently missed the next game too. So, you know, fingers crossed as a Buckeye fan that we get a game in this weekend, and it's a team you should beat in Michigan State. But, you know, with this virus and with all the unknowns and the Big Ten's protocols, you know, who knows? And
we might be playing in the Bourbon Bowl this year.
Might be going against Bobby Boucher and SCLSU. But, you know, having huge hopes going into the season. Now, Justin Fields' Heisman chances are probably out the window. Only playing 4 games. His last game wasn't great. But, you know, the Big Ten has set in place, you have to play a minimum of 6 games to make the Big Ten title game. Now, Ohio State obviously is the best team in the East. They beat the next best team, Indiana. And so let's just say Ohio State plays 5 games. They go 5-0. They're ranked number 4 in the country, or 3 in the country, whatever it might be. But they only play 5 games. Are they going to, so they're then going to put Indiana in over Ohio State. You know, it's just mind blowing. And the Big Ten has dug its own grave. Honestly, they did not give any flexibility in scheduling. They did not give any leeway to these teams, and these protocols in place are way more strict than the ACC or the SEC. And it's frustrating as a fan, because, you know, health comes first and foremost. Obviously, we're all on the same page with that. But if a guy is healthy and tests positive and doesn't show any signs, and then, you know, 10 days later he's fine, has tested negative for 3 straight days, but you're going to make him sit out for 11 days after that too, to meet the 21. I just don't understand it. It's frustrating. So I don't know. I really just don't know what the Big Ten's thinking and what they're doing. But Ohio State is sort of the cash cow for the Big Ten. You know, your other big programs that normally bring in money, Penn State and Michigan, who just played this weekend. Penn State got their first win over Jimmy Harbaugh. And we're going to talk about Harbaugh, and we'll see how much time we have, but we're going to talk about Harbaugh a little bit too, and what Michigan should do with them. But I don't know. It's a mess. And, you know, again, fingers crossed Ohio State their next 2 games are at Michigan State and home for Michigan. That's it. That's the regular season. So, that's going to be their body of work at most 6 games, and if they don't play this weekend, at most 5, and they're hanging by a thread. So,
Yep.
Couple other, I want to get to a couple other NCAA things. Can we throw that top 25 pull back up? So if you're looking at that, Indiana is still sitting in the top 10. They're ranked number 10 in the country. They beat Maryland this past weekend, but they lost Penix, who is their starting quarterback for the season. He tore his ACL, which is just, another brutal injury. But Indiana having an amazing season. They probably would have been, it probably would have been a very close spread against Wisconsin this weekend. I don't know what it opened up against before the quarterback injury, but now they're a 14.5 point underdog at Wisconsin this weekend. Even with their backup quarterback, that feels like an overreaction to me, but hopefully Indiana can keep their special season going. A cool moment again for women in sports, like I mentioned earlier, Vanderbilt kicker Sarah Fuller, who was their goalie, got to kick in a game this weekend, which was really cool. But she's the first woman to play in an NCAA game and a Power 5 game in history. So pretty awesome moment for her, and congratulations for her.
Wasn't that a movie? Wasn't there an actual movie about a woman kicker coming on?
There was there's a movie and coming up in our when we do our movies, sports polls and all that stuff, there's a movie called Necessary Roughness when I think she was a supermodel, Kathy Ireland.
Yes, yeah, that's
was
exactly
in,
what I
was
thought,
in that
yep.
movie. And that's a great movie too, by the way. But yeah, she was the kicker in that movie, and there have been other female kickers, I believe 2 or maybe 3 in history, but they played at smaller divisions or non-Power 5 schools. But again, just a kind of a cool moment for her, and good. Vanderbilt ended up firing their coach too, by the way, after this. I think that he was like, you know what, we're keeping the female kicker this weekend, so they might have been like, well, we can't fire them now. Let's wait till after the game at least, so it doesn't look too bad, so they don't have too much egg on their face. But good job by him being a kind of a bad team. Vanderbilt's just bad, but a cool moment for her. So just some other upsets this weekend in college football. Oregon State and Oregon. Oregon State, they knocked off the Oregon Ducks as a 14-point underdog, and a big game in the Big Ten. Michigan State, who Ohio State plays this weekend, handed Northwestern, coming off a huge win over Wisconsin. Michigan State handed them their first loss. And also our Rutgers Scarlet Knights, they went into Purdue and beat Purdue. So Rutgers is having a really nice season. And so,
no more butts of any joke.
No. You know who the butt of the joke is this year? Your boy Harbaugh.
Yeah,
so,
right.
and James Franklin. So those two are just about as bad
They've
as
had it
they deserve it. They deserve it this year. So a couple other things. Let's see. And both those teams, by the way, Michigan State and Rutgers, were double-digit underdogs in those games. So again, if you bet those teams, pretty awesome. Ball State and Toledo. Toledo just has not been very good this year in the MAC, but Ball State dominated them. There were some other really big upsets this weekend in some smaller action. East Carolina, South Alabama, and Hawaii all upset their opponents this weekend, which, again, to a common fan, that doesn't sound like a big deal, but for like looking at some sports lines and betting, I didn't even realize the Hawaii Nevada game. I didn't realize Hawaii was such a big underdog, but they were in that game. So pretty cool.
Now, as far as schools like YSU and that team from Alliance, they didn't do anything this year, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, they just totally shut down their programs.
Yeah. YSU, Mount Union, completely done. For shut down things for the fall. Now, a couple of the smaller, like North Dakota State, who's in YSU's division, who's actually YSU's first opponent in February. They play February 1st. Luckily, it's in a dome in North Dakota, in Fargo. But They played one game, and it's because they have a really elite quarterback that's probably going to be a first-round talent. They did play one game to sort of showcase him, but yeah, YSU shut down football stuff, and their whole conference did, and a lot of the I think it's called the FCS. I always get that confused, but the FCS schools, the smaller division schools, shut down, and Mount Union, their conference.
That's got to be hard, but especially the schools that do a majority of their recruiting through their football program.
Sure.
I mean, it's probably
absolutely
really rough to get students.
No doubt. There was actually a kid that was playing for North Carolina this weekend against Notre Dame. Should be a high school senior right now, but the state where he was from shut down all high school football this year. So he graduated early and entered into the 2020 class instead of the 21 class so he could play, and he was eligible. And he was one of those high end prospects where they just threw him in the lineup right now. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Just kind of wrapping up a few of the other NCAA notes I have this weekend. Alabama and Auburn, which is called the Iron Bowl. Alabama just dominated Auburn. Auburn's kind of been up and down this year, but Alabama's obviously the top team in the country for a reason. Notre Dame, who I thought could be for a dogfight against North Carolina, showed that they were pretty impressive, especially on the defensive end. They held North Carolina scoreless in the second half in a 14-point win. Clemson put up 31 points in the first quarter against Pitt in a 52-17 win. Texas A&M did not look good this weekend, but they did beat LSU 20-7. And just a few other names. There's a couple teams this year that you may not have heard of. Liberty is sitting at 9-1. They are taking on Coastal Carolina this weekend, who is 9-0. Cool fact for both of these: ESPN College Game Day is heading to Myrtle Beach this weekend. That is something I thought I would never say. So ESPN Game Day will be heading to Myrtle Beach this weekend to highlight the Flames taking on the I don't even know what their mascot is. Chanticleers or Chancellors? I don't know what it is. So if somebody knows what the hell that is, the Coastal Carolina mascot, that might be something I need to look up here in a minute.
But this thing presented small schools getting on the big stage, and now we get to find this stuff out.
Yeah, and top 25 teams. I mean, pretty awesome. Liberty's sitting at 25, and where's Coastal Carolina? Looks like they're at number 14 right now. So pretty cool. And the only thing bad for these schools are sometimes when they get such a great season like that is sometimes their coach then gets plucked by a bigger school that needs it, or, maybe an NFL spot, something like that.
Same thing like when you have March Madness and a little school makes it somehow.
Exactly. Yeah, right. Exactly. Things. Just like that. Yeah. Exactly like that. Last two notes I want to make about the NCAA, and we're going to talk about the MAC. So two schools that are kind of local to here. I talked about Kent State, Buffalo, and Kent State's a pretty good team. Kent State, I only wanted to talk about them because they're from our 330, and 330 Sports Show. We're gonna throw them some love. But last week, obviously, they got kind of handled by Buffalo. Listen to this stat. So they lost that game 70-41. Okay, but listen to this. Buffalo's running back Jarrett Patterson ran for 409 yards in the game. 400.
Is that a record?
It was second most in FBS history, but he did tie the touchdown record scored in a game. He had 8 touchdowns.
Wow. Put him on the fantasy squad.
So in his last 4 games, Jarrett Patterson of Buffalo has ran for 920 yards. Dang. 4 games.
Sign him up.
And the final note for college football, Akron. The Akron Zips also, again, 330, but unfortunately not quite doing well. They have lost 21 straight games, 21 straight. But they're taking on another Ohio school that's struggling this weekend from the MAC. They're taking on Bowling Green. These are the two bottom teams in their side of the conference. So Akron, you might have a chance to snap that streak this weekend. And so good luck to the Akron Zips. I do kind of root for Bowling Green a little bit too here and there, but hopefully Akron can get off the schneid there. So, so that kind of wraps up the NFL talk, the NCAA talk. I do want to hit a couple notes around the rest of the sports world. I had mentioned at the top of the show, Mike Tyson and Roy Jones Jr., legends in the boxing community, fought this past weekend. This was sort of I guess you want to call it an exhibition. This wasn't going to go in their actual records, but I didn't pay for the fight, so I didn't see the whole thing. But from everything I read and some highlights I saw, Mike Tyson looked pretty damn good. And both of these guys are in their 50s. Right. In their 50s. First of all, I couldn't imagine getting hit with a punch right now, let alone when I'm in my mid 50s. Roy Jones Jr. had a little bit of the dad bod going on. He had a little bit of man boobs, it looked like, and he used to be, when you see these guys and, they're in amazing shape. Yeah, they are. But Tyson looked good. He looked like he was in fighting shape. So,
next year, the NFL, they're going to actually play the Hall of Fame game using Hall of Fame inductees.
And we'll see. Yeah, some of those new guys might be able to throw it around, but could you imagine one of those 72-year-old offensive linemen trying to make some blocks? That's an interesting concept.
Yep,
I like
new
that.
Theme. Geriatric sports.
Just one other note, and I'm gonna try to get in touch with YSU's coach Jared Calhoun tonight, but college and YSU, from what I understand, is still under quarantine, both their men's and their women's program, but a lot of other schools around the country are. And I have a feeling it's going to be like this for the rest of the season. A lot of these schools are going to be shut down for 2 weeks or 10 days or whatever it might be, but there's going to be a lot of cancellations, a lot of postponements, a lot of upset people and a lot of upset athletes and coaches. But I will say a lot of these schools, I give them a lot of credit because they're trying to do just about everything to get a lot of these games in. Right now, I saw this past weekend on ESPN, I can't remember the teams that were playing, but they looked like they were playing in a high school gym. And this was not the Maui Invitational. Like sometimes you'll see in the Maui Invitational, they'll play in this high school gym that looks like, you go to any school around the area, Liberty, Crestview, whatever it might be, you go to these schools and it's a small, legit gym. But another thing they're doing kind of like this mini bubble in Connecticut at the Mohegan Sun, I think is a casino. So they had a lot of teams there. So they were isolated in their hotel rooms, but they got a lot of games in there. But, we'll talk more about college hoops in future podcasts, and hopefully they can keep their seasons going. But it's going to be a really interesting season, especially with basketball. I don't know how they're going to do all this with, especially indoors, and
gyms are gross anyhow, so it's going to be interesting.
The gym to me is one of my favorite places, but the basketball gym is one of my favorite places, but you're right. It's hot, it's sweaty, there's not a ton of circulation. Basketball, believe it or not, is arguably more of a contact sport a lot of times than football is. Now there's not the hitting on every play, but your body, you're knocking with people on everything, every rebound, every shot, whatever it might be. And it's going to be an interesting scenario to see what they go on. What do you think? I don't know. What's your thoughts on COVID in the basketball world?
It's like a petri dish. So
it really is.
Now, a couple weeks, Ohio should have the vaccine. Colleges will have first crack at some of this stuff. So maybe by the point end of January, February, this will all be sorted out and we don't have to mess with it. So
I personally think if there's so much disruption, they should pause all activities, push it back till after the new year, maybe the second, third week of February, and see where you're at.
Totally.
But like right now, for example, this is just so weird to me. Like we talked about earlier with the 49ers, they're not allowing contact sports. Right now in Trumbull County, high school girls and boys basketball are not allowed to play, but in Mahoning County, they're allowing teams to play. And in Columbiana County, they're allowing teams to play. So you could literally be, I'm going to use Liberty, for example, because I think they're in Trumbull County. And let's just use Ursuline, who is at the very tip end of, right Youngstown
too.
Yeah, literally, you could hit a driver from Ursuline to Liberty practically, and one school's a lot of play, but another's not, just because of a county line, and to me that's getting into a dicey. Yeah, it's unfair to those kids that work hard, and so I don't know what it's going to be, but I think you either let them all play or don't let them play. And
something tells me we're going to keep talking about this for the next couple of months.
I think so. And I give a lot of credit to the high school football things, but again, that was outdoors, a little bit warmer weather. Yep. Now we're into flu season. It's going to be dicey. So, last thing, and we'll close with this as I'm over my, probably my allotted time slot here, but, some good news. The Mahoning Valley Scrappers, who were threatened to possibly be like pretty much wiped out last year. One, they didn't have a season because of COVID, but Major League Baseball was looking at eliminating a lot of minor league teams. So, and I'm just taking this right from a news article I read. So, but the Mahoning Valley Scrappers will maintain its affiliation with Major League Baseball, which is awesome. It's going to be in a little bit different way beginning this summer. So the Scrappers, who will be in conjunction with Major League Baseball, and what's called the Prep Baseball Report, have PBR. Some of you listening might think PBR is a little different thing you might drink, but PBR is the Prep Baseball Report, have announced the formation of a Major League Baseball draft league beginning in 2021. So the Scrappers are going to be part of this with, I think, 5 or 6 other teams. So they're going to remain affiliated with Major League Baseball, not necessarily the Cleveland Indians, but the league will focus on top college level prospects who are eligible to be drafted that summer by major league teams. So this partnership preserves the Scrappers and some of these other teams. And this is going to be really cool for baseball fans, because you're not going to just see some up and coming prospects for the Indians. You're going to be seeing some top up and coming prospects for all of Major League Baseball, which is really kind of cool. And more importantly, it saves baseball in Niles, saves baseball for the Mahoning Valley. There would be a lot of disappointed sports fans in our area if we lost the Scrappers. For sure. And we know, Frankie Lindor has played with the Scrappers, CC Sabathian, just a small sample size of dozens of guys that have made it to the Major League Baseball.
Now, do you know if that league is like a paid league where guys draw salary?
It is. Now they are on a rookie contract, so a lot of those guys are drafted either from high school or college, and they were thrown into that league, and that's kind of the first step of a stepping stone, and then going to single A, double A, triple A, and then hopefully the major leagues for them. But I don't know salaries or anything like that. Obviously, when you're not at the professional level, I know you make a lot less money. Some of those guys will even say, being because you're still considered a professional baseball player, but being a professional baseball player in the minor leagues is probably not a glamorous job. You're not making a ton of money. You're traveling on, probably a lot of times buses, as opposed to, chartered jets and flights and things like that.
And it's expensive living on the road like that.
It is. Sure. It is. And your meals are probably, you're in smaller cities, Niles versus, and nothing against Niles or our area, but it's not Cleveland, it's not Pittsburgh, it's not New York, it's not Chicago. But again, you're not living a luxurious lifestyle. Right. But that's part of the price you pay. You got to grind if you want to get to the top. And it's just really kind of cool to see that they're going to keep that organization around for, for our area, but also for baseball in general. So, I kind of went a little wordy today.
It's all good.
But a lot of good information, a lot of good stuff. And I know I missed a lot of stuff from this weekend. But if there's anything you want to hear for Thursday's upcoming show, feel free to write in, and we will get that on Thursday's podcast. So thanks to Mario. Thanks to Joe. And again, hope everyone had a nice Thanksgiving this past weekend. Hopefully you have a good week. Stay safe out there, and we will see you on Thursday.
Thank you for listening to this show on Youngstown Studio. If you like our programming, we invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow our Facebook page, or subscribe to your favorite podcast platform like iTunes or Spotify. This is original Youngstown content, and we would appreciate you sharing the videos and the word about us.